Hello everyone, welcome to Super Coaching UPSC by Textbook. This is Venkatesh. So friends, today we'll be discussing about a very interesting topic, types of agriculture in India. Types of agriculture in India. So if you see here, in India, we all know that we practice different varieties of agriculture, be it the subsistence agriculture, the dry agriculture farming which we do in certain areas, the wet farming which we cultivate in certain areas, the irrigated farming, the organic farming, commercial farming, plantation, so many varieties. So the cultivation of crops in India is having a huge diversity, right? So we will try to have a general understanding about what is this diversity in general. I hope you all are having no issues with this. Is the audio and video clear? Right? Okay, that's good. Now, when you talk about this kind of type of agriculture in India, we know that agriculture is simply cultivation of crops, but the way which we cultivate crops, the kind of, you have the things like here, irrigation, availability of water, availability of here it is talking about here climate, you see the climate, the availability of water here, or else the use of fertilizers in the organic farming, the kind of fertilizers, whether you are using the organic fertilizers or the chemical fertilizers, the economic thing, what is the type of crop which you are growing for what, plantation agriculture, how are you cultivating certain crops on a large scale, and the nature of the used utility of the inputs, right? And also the kind of tools we are using. So we have seen that in India, we have a varieties of crops which are grown in India with respect to the nature of cultivation of such crops, which is type of farming or types of cultivation. So in this session, we'll be having in detail understanding about types of farming or types of cultivation, right? So let us understand about these kind of things. So one such thing you need to understand, basically, there is something called as subsistence versus commercial. We can divide this into multiple things. Let me divide you and help you to understand. On one thing, we can call it as subsistence agriculture. On another thing, we can call it as commercial agriculture. Subsistence, which is meant for only for the local cultivation of that particular family. Commercial, which is meant for say selling in the market. There is a variation. Similarly, we also have around shifting cultivation, and we also have sedentary cultivation, which is at same place. Now, shift, the kind of land which we are using for the cultivation, we are changing every day or every crop season until the fertility is lost. Whereas in the sedentary, you don't change at all. This is one type. Then you also have around intensive versus extensive. Intensive versus extensive. So you can have a variety of agriculture crops which can grow in our country in terms of using different kinds of things. Now every word has a particular meaning. Does that mean that we are only having one variety of cultivation of crops? Not necessarily. Though in general in India is known for intensive subsistent cultivation, we also find all these kind of things as well, considering India is not a very small country. It is a vast country, has diverse topography, diverse climate, diverse say backgrounds of the populations and all. Considering that, we have a huge range. In fact, we are a small replica of the entire world. There is nothing wrong in saying that. So that is the thing. Now you see subsistence, commercial, everything. Mostly India is subsistence, sedentary, intensive. Indian monsoonal lands is known for intensive subsistence cultivation. But certain areas, we also have commercial crops. Within that commercial, we have a variety called plantation crops. We have extensive crops, which is mechanized. Now, along with this, you also need to learn about other things. Say, what do you mean by mechanization of agriculture? Okay, mechanization. Mechanized agriculture, that is also their use of more modern equipments, that we are doing it. And we are also doing about some other things, say mechanization, and also there are some other kind of things. For example, dry land farming. What do you mean by that? We'll also try to learn about some other things, things like plantation agriculture, as well as mixed cropping, mixed agriculture. Both are different. Mixed cropping is different from mixed farming. Now, what are all these kind of things? All these things which we need to understand. So the topic types of agriculture, it will help you to understand all these variations. We can classify into multiple ways. Another such classification is what I am showing you here. You can see cultivation of agriculture is what agriculture. What is agriculture? Cultivation of crops using the soil. One variety is subsistence, which is meant for domestic consumption or the domestic that subsistence for that particular family. Within that, we have variation like intensive farming, where do you use it intensively every inch of the crop of the land. Primitive is like a shifting cultivation. Then you have the commercial farming, which is exclusively meant for exports or for the market. You can export or for the market. You can see commercial grain farming, say the wheat cultivation, which you find in the steppes, commercial grain farming. Plantation agriculture, the coffee cultivation of Assam. Mixed farming, so there is a use of cultivation of mixed farming, which is crops as well as livestock rearing. So all these are commercial. So there is a nature as well of farming. So the nature of farming which we see in India, traditionally which we see like this, cultivation of crops and getting the outcomes out of that has been varying with a lot of things. We need to understand all these kind of things. I hope you all are following, right? Right. So keeping this into consideration, now let's see. See, the first variety you will try to understand is the shifting cultivation. Now, as the name itself is talking about, shifting cultivation. What do you mean by that? Cultivation of crops, where that land is frequently shifted. Cultivation of crops, that is there, but the land which we use is frequently shifted. Then you need to ask the question why. Why it is shifted? The reason is simple: to get around more fertility. How do you get the fertility? By slashing and burn. That's why it is also called as slash and burn agriculture. Why do you think that in our agriculture areas we frequently shift it? We choose a certain area, we try to cut the crops of the whatever the forest which is there in that area, the trees and all, we cut it, deforestation. Then whatever we cut it, that will be burned. As it is burned, that is converted into the fertility. We will get much needed fertilizer for the soil. So the moment you are getting the burning it, slashing it and then burning it, you are getting that fertility. The moment you are getting that fertility, you are extracting that region for the resources of the region for the cultivation of crops. As you cultivate, the next thing you are doing is, whatever the crops you are cultivating, the next thing you are doing is, these kind of things will be completely practice for 3-4 years until the fertility of the soil is exhausted. Once that soil is exhausted, then you will choose another area and we will allow the old exhausted land for it to recover its fertility. For example, how do you think that soil fertility? You can see this picture. It is talking clearly about we cut the certain patch of the land, we burn it, as you can see the ashes and all here. Then this will be cleared and all. Then agriculture will be practiced. I mean the wood will be cleared. Then we will practice agriculture here. Will continue for a few years as long as the fertility is maintained. After the fertility is maintained, you can see here burning, using, then we produce crops. Then after that, once you see that this is cropped for 1 to 3 years, then we'll see a new area, we'll burn a new area. We are allowing this tomb to be recovering. Then previously cleared plots recover as new plots are cropped. Once you recover, in fact, in some of the areas, even in northeastern India, which we call it as zooming cultivation, they do this kind of thing to recover. Right? In fact, after recovering, they once again produce another variety of crop. So it is not like they keep this as a wasteland or a barren land. Yes, for a few years they kept fallow. After that, it is not converted into a wasteland. Once again, it will be recovered. Right? So this is the kind of difference we have about agriculture in India. Right? The land selected for cropping, then you select a certain area, then you burn it, you produce the crops, you allow it to fallow for some years. What is fallow land? Where you don't practice agriculture for one season in a year or few seasons. That is what is called fallow land. It need not be, say, for example, if you go, there is a one thing called as current fallow. When you practice in our agriculture terms, current fallow. Current fallow means for this particular season, say the season which is running right now, Rabi season. If you don't practice agriculture, then that is called current fallow. Then you practice agriculture after a certain period of time. After for few, you leave it for around 2 to 3, you leave this entire year, say the now the 24 Rabi, then the upcoming 24 Kharif, then the 24-25 Rabi season, which will be coming up from the late year of this and the next new year. All these things you will be leaving it. Then you will start it next year, 25 Kharif. Then that is what is called it as current, it is net fallow land. We will call it as a fallow land. Current fallow is for this particular season. So even sometimes fallow land can be kept vacant even for 1 to 2 years. After that, we will be utilizing again. It is not converting into barren land. That is one such kind of dimension. In fact, there is also a different perspective here, calling that this is also a very good important sustainable practice in Northeast India, where using the same land again. But why do you think that shifting cultivation is very much in as a conflicted thing? If you see this shifting cultivation, the conflict is with respect to the efficiency of utility of the resources. Efficiency of utility of natural resources. So there are multiple perspectives across the world. One such perspective is in the present era, where you have variety of production methods, we need not, this was a practice which is not having much of an impact in the globe, impact in terms of climate change in the past. For example, let's go back 200 years ago, 300 years ago. Back then, when you are cultivating the crops using the shifting cultivation, it was not having any impact in terms of climate across the world because the population is less. Population is less, the utility of the land needed for cultivation of crops is also less. So we don't deforest a large chunk of area. Whereas now, when there is more population, almost at around the year 1830, the population of the world is 1 billion, less than the present population of India. Whereas right now, the world population is around 8 billion. So the times have changed, the population have changed. Definitely the methods of cultivation also has to change, which can suit the present needs. So that's where there is one perspective saying that the present kind of outcome you are getting, ultimately you use the natural resources of land, soil and all. Ultimately, what are you getting? You are cultivating crops for eating, right? So what is the outcome? That is the outcome, crops. We have modern methods of cultivation which are also not using that much level of resources. This is one perspective which is being taught us, right? That is the deforestation we have to stop. And also in the present era of climate change, this shifting cultivation, zoom cultivation, which we call it as slash and burn agriculture, it is having an impact even on climate change. That is what, right? Efficiency of utility, number one. Number two, we can talk about the present deforestation in the era of climate change. Era of climate change. Then there is also another perspective which I have observed, that some of the people who are part of this, who have studied extensively about slash and burn agriculture in the northeastern India, they came to know that it is not just a cultivation of practicing of agriculture, but also it's a way of life. It has, there is so much amount of traditional knowledge which you can get out of that, in terms of the storage, in terms of the kind of soil, allowing of the opportunity of the soil to get replenished again, right? The kind of knowledge with respect to seeds and all. There is so much knowledge which we can get out of shifting cultivation beyond just calling this as deforestation, right? But there is once again the debate of efficiency of utility of natural resources. So these are the things which we need to understand. See, a basic approach of understanding what is shifting cultivation, every one of us know, but what it is good, that is where the research we need to do about these things. Then out of this thing, considering now that you have understood, we need to remember about the different names of slash and burn agriculture across the world for MCQ practice. So one such MCQ practice you can ask is, you can see, they can ask you what are the different names of shifting cultivations across the world. Say Myanmar, Tongia. Okay, you have Tamrai of Thailand, Kaigin of Philippines, right? Ladang of the Indonesia, Java, Malaysia, Indonesia, Huma, or Chetamini of Uganda, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Roko of Brazil, right? Roca of Brazil, right? Roca, right? That's a better word. Roca of Brazil, right? Then Conuco of Venezuela, Conuco. Then Milia of Mexico, or they can also call it as Milpa. You can see this, Milpa. So Milia or Mexico or Milpa. So this is the thing about Milpa. So multiple names. You need to remember about these names. Few countries, at least remember one for each continent. Say for Indonesia, you remember about Ladang. For example, Africa, you remember about the name I have given you, Chetamini, Roca of Brazil. So such kind of things, when you try to remember about multiple continents, in the auction, if they ask you about elimination, about match the following, it is easier for us to do, right? So that is the thing which we need to remember. Similarly, when you talk about different names of slash and burn agriculture within India, you can also have the northeastern states, the Juming cultivation, the Manipur, you have the Pamlo. We call it as Kumari in the Western Ghats, Kumari in the Western Ghats. You can call it as Kurua in Jharkhand. Odisha, you can call it as Koman or Bringa. Dahiya, Bewar, or in Madhya Pradesh. In Andhra Pradesh, we call it as Podu. Andaman Nicobar, we will call it as Deepa, right? Chhattisgarh also will calling it as Deepa. All these are names. These names becomes very, very important for your prelims exam, because such kind of things can be repeatedly asked. Then what kind of crops you go? Tropical crops. Shifting cultivation, mostly the tropical crops. You can see typical fruits and vegetables are grown. Fruits and vegetables, some kind of cashew nuts in certain places, cashew nuts, right? You can see potato, you can see sweet potato, which is also being grown here. Tobacco is also grown. So these are the typical tropical crops which is being grown, right? Okay, so that's the thing. So crops grown in shifting cultivation, that is also a variety. right? So you can see these kind of things, and as well as even corn, maize, such things are also grown, but generally the popular ones are the ones which I have discussed, right? So they might ask you which of the following crops are not grown as part of the subsistence agriculture, as part of the shifting agriculture. That way also they can ask. Then we will go to the next topic, subsistence agriculture. Subsistence. Then what is subsistence? For example, you see this picture, subsistence agriculture. What do you mean by subsistence is there is not much of an input. Okay, while you are cultivating crops, you don't have much ability to bear around gathering around more inputs, because you don't have much bear much of the inputs. Tools are very primitive, or the older ones, as you can see here, ox and all. You will see that that is what we call it as subsistence agriculture or subsistence farming. Right. I hope you all you are not having any doubts. Let me see some kind of comments here. Right. I hope you don't have any doubts. Good, good. Right. Then subsistence farming, where you are finding that it is their subsistence, as the name suggests, it is enough to feed their family, enough to feed their family, not much amount of modern technology, very primitive tools we can use. We are using very primitive tools. Usually yield levels are very less. Yield levels are very less. Right? So we can say that because of this, what will happen? The level of production will be very less. So we'll have these characteristics. Low level of production, right? Usually, I think we all have studied a concept called as disguised labor in economy. Disguised labor. What do you mean by disguised labor? Disguised labor is labor which we are using beyond the needed capacity. For example, if 2 to 3 people are sufficient in terms of working hours for the growing of this variety of crop, you will see that entire family is part of this land, because we are utilizing more. So that is the thing. Low level of production, more labor is deployed, labor is used significantly. That's where I have used this word called as disguised labor. Disguised labor, right? Then you will see that production is also very less, and yield levels, and that is the reason why it is meant for subsistence, meant for sustenance. You feed the family, it is meant for feeding the family, sustenance of life. It is not meant for exporting like things. Now, which kind of crops are grown? Usually the food crops, right? And that's the simple thing. Which kind of crops you grow here? Food crops. You don't grow crop like tobacco here for subsistence, no? Right? So that is the kind of thing you need to understand. So mostly the food crops which are there. So you can see that most of the crops, food crops, are grown in this variety. Then you can also see some other things. You can see here primitive low level of technology, right. Now you see the next one, plantation agriculture. You can see this plantation agriculture, the Britishers which have introduced the plantation agriculture. So usually you will see that you see a single variety of crop is grown, single variety of crop is grown, a single crop over a large area, single crop over a large area. You will also see that here, once you grow a single crop over large area, usually you will see that agriculture practiced on industrial lines. Agriculture practiced on industrial lines. That means what? You have a CEO, you have a marketing team, okay, you check the productions, all these kind of things as well. So remember something like estate farming, a large area which we call it as estate, there you try to produce one variety and you have a CEO, market, branding, you look after market, you look after branding, all such kind of things. For example, if I produce a small tea and I produce it, not many of us would be knowing it despite the quality of tea is good. But if I brand it, if I sell it continuously with the same quality, then people would be buying, no? For example, that's the thing, no? Always, it is always applicable in such way. So such things, you need to look for the branding, the marketing, all such kind of things as well. So agriculture practiced on industrial lines. And in fact, it is the Britishers, you can see this, Britishers who have introduced this kind of thing in different parts of the world. And presently the plantation crops you can see like sugarcane, okay, like coffee, tea, you have rubber, or even in some areas banana, right? So all these are the different varieties of plantation crops which are grown, right? Then we have the intensive agriculture. Now you can see this. Intensive agriculture is you to use the entire agriculture land whichever is available with more intensively utilizing the chemicals, fertilizers, chemicals or fertilizers. The intensive agriculture here talks about these things where you need to get maximum output from minimum land resources. The objective here is maximum output from minimum land resources. So chemicals. For example, India, all the rivers, wherever you hand, the rivers have fertile soils. We use every inch of the land. We use every inch of land. Use this every inch of land and try to grow. That is what is called as intensive agriculture. For example, India's monsoonal lands are known for intensive agriculture. Example I can give you, rice. Rice is one, right? So this is the variety of crops variety of agriculture which we practice, through which different crops are grown in a different way, right? So that is about intensive agriculture. Then you can see here extensive agriculture. See, for example, whatever the land is available in intensive, we try to use with minimum land resources. Whatever the land is there, it is usually minimum. It is not like huge. For example, if you go to countries like the temperate grasslands of Europe, where you find the pustas, Hungary, steppes, grasslands, temperate grasslands where we cultivate wheat, you find there that it is extensive in nature. It is extensive. So you have a huge acres of land. That huge acre of land you will be cultivating with respect to the machines over large areas using machines. So mechanization of agriculture. Mechanization. Even nowadays we have drones. Using drones, they try to even sow the seeds. Using drones, they try to observe the soil fertility. So there is less labor here, more amount of technology, less labor. This is the characteristic. Example you can talk about is, say, the maize cultivation or the corn in the temperate grasslands, the wheat cultivation in the temperate grasslands. say around the regions, even certain areas in America, even cotton is grown in the same way, but mostly it is maize and wheat, dominated by maize and wheat. This is what we call it as the extensive cultivation. Then you can see here, there is so many varieties. Mixed farming is also there. You can see here. So this is mixed farming. Mixed farming, livestock plus agriculture. Livestock plus agriculture, that is crops. This is what we call mixed farming. And the same thing, there is also another word we can use. This is different. Please understand. Mixed cropping is different. Mixed cropping is same land, but you use different kinds of regions of the land, say a row land, different rows for different varieties of crops. So same land, same time, different crops. So two crops rotations. You can have 2 rows, 3 rows, 4 rows, 5 rows, so many varieties. Different areas across India will practice this. This is also one method of agriculture, mixed cropping. I hope you all have liked this video. You have understood around different types of video, different types of agriculture research. If you have any doubts, please get into my Telegram channel where you can have always ask the doubts whatever you have, and you can interact directly with me. Write that. So we'll meet again with a new topic. Tomorrow we'll discuss about previous year questions asked from Indian physiography. Until then, we'll come back with a new topic tomorrow. Until then, good boy. Thank you. Have a good time. Learn well. Happy learnings. Right? Thank you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.